All right, welcome back. And we're going to talk bass stuff now. I've been waiting for this whole thing. So let's grab some basses. I think we got to start from square one, especially for the producers that are watching this. I said, let's start with a P and let's start with a jazz. Probably the two most common basses. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. So you have your P now, right?
I do.
And when you pick up a P, this is what I want to know. Like in your mind, as a professional bass player of 30 plus years, what kind of sound are you hearing when you pick up a P?
The hits. Every single hit that's ever been, ever on anything. If it's ever been a hit, it was done with this bass. Now, not all of them are going to be the flat wounds or the incredibly muted instrument. But by and large, you could record every single hit that has ever been made in modern music, any genre, with this instrument. And you could do it with a 4-string, and this is all that anybody needs. And we could sell this thing really short, really quick by saying, but that's the truth. Now, what is the thing that says, I'm not a P-bass player? Well, my mentor, I don't think we've talked about this yet, but my mentor was Mike Chapman, and he was Garth Brooks' session bass player, among others. He did George Jones and Joe Diffie and just Black Hawk, everybody. But anyway, he was old school, and he said, I hate a P-bass. And this bass right here actually was made for me by the Bluesmen Vintage people in Spring Hill, Tennessee. But we did this the year that Mike passed away in tribute to Mike, because this is an exact duplicate of his 71 Fender Jazz to a T. It's got every scratch mark, every single.
I didn't know you did that.
We had Mike's bass, and down to the pickups, the bridge, everything. It's all a complete mock-up of his bass. But he was a jazz bass guy. Well, the jazz bass, now this has been said on a few other Rick Beatos, but the jazz bass was the upgrade.
Okay.
So when Leo came up with the first precision bass, it was similar to this, but it had a single coil pickup that would have set a little further up towards the neck. And the idea that Leo had is that it would be played with a thumb. There would be a little thumb or a finger rest right here, and it would be played. And your thumb would be like a pick.
Yeah.
So that was the original concept. And then in '57, he changed it and made this a split coil pickup, which took the hum out because the old pickups hummed. And if you played anywhere, I can only imagine how bad the sound must have been in the '50s with all the noise, because it's still bad.
Yeah.
If you play a single coil bass right now, it's still bad. But this, in essence, it kills all the hum.
Is that why they're offset? Because like a Les Paul has a humbucker, which is two together, but that's, I'm just curious why they're offset.
I don't know,
geography.
Why you couldn't, well, and you can, that's called a humbucker. It just would require the pole pieces to have gone here and here, and then you have a humbucker. It's essentially what a Music Man, Stingray.
Well, Stingray, but I'm even curious, and I don't know if you know the answer to this one, but the angle to those, do you know? I mean, is it picking up certain strings more?
Why you have this one up here, this one down here?
And an angled down and angled up.
Okay, well that's matching the radius of the fingerboard.
Okay.
So basically, these old P basses like this one have a radius that's what's called a 7 1/4 inch.
Yeah.
So the less the number is, the more round the radius is, and therefore you want your pickups to evenly pick up each string, so they have to be done like that. Now you could stick an EMG in there. The way that an EMG works is completely different from these pole piece things. So it could just sit down there flat and pick up all the strings evenly. Yeah. It's great technology. But that's the old school.
Okay, one other question before you put down that. So we know the sound, obviously it's fat, it's thick, I don't know.
But this can be everything.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like you got punk players. I'm just trying to think of, the Clash.
Yeah.
You know, this has been on anything you could ever imagine, and all that it takes to do it is the guy playing it, and then maybe the strings factor a little bit.
Okay.
Because if I did have round wounds on here, and maybe I was playing with a pick, I could get the twangier tone.
Yeah. Is the neck a different shape as well than the jazz?
It is.
Okay.
It's so. And there are different P basses. There are different P bass necks.
All right.
This old vintage style that would have been anywhere from 57 to 65 would have had an inch and 1.65 or 1.7, but it's almost nearly 2 inches at the nut.
Okay.
So it's wider.
Yep.
And then you also have a little more girth back here with the neck, and it. Around 60 to 61, they started getting a little slimmer and fatter, but the older, late 50s necks were like logs. They were big, old, thick, fat baseball bat necks.
Yeah.
So completely different feel. But you've got different nut widths, you've got different neck profiles, and they can still be a P bass. Yeah. But ultimately, what makes a P bass is two things: a 34-inch scale from the nut to the bridge, and then this pickup. And it has to be right there, because you could have this same pickup and put it here and it won't sound the same.
Yeah.
Or you could put it here and it won't sound the same.
Yeah.
It has to be right there. And there's a harmonic thing. So they're purposely placed. I'm not going to get it because it's muted so much.
Yeah.
But they're purposely placed by Leo. I literally think he had a bass that they used that just had a gaping hole right here from here to here.
Just kind of
and they tried pickups everywhere and ultimately settled, you know.
Crazy.
So to say that he got it right, he really did.
Yeah.
He really did. He got it right. This one is all that ever needed to be. But
it's passive.
It is.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify that.
It is. So but guys like Mike Chapman that said, oh no, I'm a jazz bass guy. Well, why are you a jazz bass guy?
Yeah.
Well, because they thought that the jazz bass would do all the things that the P bass did, because you could just single out this one. You know, I've got round wounds on here, so I'm not going to get the exact tone, but you could get that same thing, but then you could also, you could get Marcus Miller.
Because you have two pickups and two different. I'm going to make sure the camera gets that. I know. Again, most people know this. We're bass players. I'm just really trying to let the non-bass players know.
That's true. You have options here with your controls. So the jazz bass allows you to have two volumes. So you got a volume for this pickup and a volume for this pickup, and then an overall tone control for the whole bass. Still passive, but all of that control. So like, you know, we started out with just the neck, which is a warmer sound. Then you come here to the middle. What happens when you put the two together is they have a phase issue, which scoops the mid-range out. And it cleans up the bass. So whereas when you do this, you don't have that control. You just have the one sound. You can change the tonality with the EQ, but you just have the one sound. So it's one-dimensional to a degree. But also what happens here is you get a lot more mid-range information. When you use this bass and you turn both of these up, you lose the mid-range, because the phase cancellation between the two pickups takes the mid-range and it goes down while it scoops the highs and the lows up. So you're basically going like that.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, it turns into a slap machine.
Yeah.
But then you can do the Jocko thing, and you can get that bridge pickup that's going to pick up all those harmonics. So that was kind of, and this is a good thing for like jazz, or if you're a soloist, you know, the voicing's different. So all of a sudden, this thing speaks with a vocal character. In other words, if I was singing with this would sound like ha 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 ha.
Okay, right.
Versus me singing like this with a beautiful character, and this.
I love that.
But what's amazing is that in the mix, with all the other instruments, it's that actually stands out. It's that can be heard. So it's not a beautiful. It's not a beautiful thing to look at.
Yeah.
Some people might find beauty in it, but in all honesty, it's very plain, it's very boring, and to listen to it by itself, I think it sounds ugly.
Yeah.
But what works is when you put it in context with the drums and the guitars and all the other things, everything that's ugly about it all of a sudden becomes money.
Yeah.
And to me, I can't use this bass at all, although I want to honor my mentor. I don't ever play jazz bass because to me, I can't get it to speak. In this both on thing, which is what everybody loves, I'm skipping out all my mids. I've got a ton of bass and highs, but I didn't need it. And so I've lost my character, lost my mid-range, and then when I go to here, this sounds a little bit like a P bass, but it's going to be noisy because when you have just a single coil pickup by itself, it's going to emit noise.
Yeah.
And the only way to make it a humbucker is to have both of them on.
Wow.
But you see, the phase cancellation happens because they're so far apart.
Mm-hmm.
If I put those two pickups together and moved them here, then I get a humbucker. And I get a Music Man. I get a Stingray.
And that's next.
And that's next.
All right.
I'll
mute that for you.
Okay, you were asking for like a similar riff on these instruments, so I'm going to I'll probably go ahead and turn the tone controls wide open, just so we get the full.
Or whatever.
Yeah, that'd
flat
be
on
flat.
The instrument.
That'd be flat. So like. Okay, now what I would say about that, the character of that is, because I've got it muted, because I've got flat wounds, that sound is replicating an upright bass.
Yep.
To the best of its ability. I'm getting as close to an upright bass with an electric that I can get. Now, when I switch to the jazz has the round wound strings. We'll put both pickups on, turn the tone control wide open, and all of a sudden, this becomes the same line, but it becomes a rock and roll. Now, what is it? Well, the round wound strings hitting the frets is a big thing because you've got a jangle, you've got a growl. Now I can clean it up. I don't have to. This is like if you want to play like Geddy Lee. But you can clean it up and you can play clean, but you still are going to have that grindy. And you hear that? I call that a zipper. You know how like when you do a zipper up and down, you're hitting those frets against that round wound string, and it's.
Man, I'm learning. I love this. All right.
So I'll take just a second here to tell you a little bit about this instrument. So this is a locally made instrument here in Nashville by a fellow named Charles Anderson. And he's been making these instruments since 2009, I believe. But he goes by the name of Chopper to his friends. And he actually was a big part of Reba McEntire's band for a long time.
Oh, wow.
I played for Reba during all of her biggest hits in the late 80s, early 90s. But he's since kind of taken a back seat to that and gotten more into building instruments. Sure. And what's really cool is he was actually really good friends with Dottie West's son. And this is a really cool story because Dottie West had a son named Mo West. If you're familiar with Dottie West, by the way, historian speaking, Dottie was a country music singer and she had a lot of hits, and she died in an untimely death in the mid-'80s. In a car wreck here in Nashville. But anyway, she had a son who went by Mo. Mm-hmm. And Mo created a bunch of legendary preamps that the session players all recorded through in the 80s. So in the 80s, you had producers that moved here from LA. And they didn't want to do anything like Nashville had ever done. And they were looking for the cleanest sounds. No buzz, no hiss. They wanted the cleanest guitars and the cleanest basses. So there was a period of probably 10 years that there wasn't any amplifiers used in any Nashville recordings at all. None. Everybody had a box made by Mo West. Wow. Everybody. And so basically, I don't know if they had tubes in them or not. I don't really think they did. Maybe they did. But anyway, it was just basically a preamp of sorts. And this preamp would go straight to tape. And it would just be super clean, super quiet. And so anyway, Mo made good friends with Chopper back in the day, and he took one of Chopper's old Fender P basses and made a preamp for him to put in his bass. And so then, unfortunately, Mo passed away, like his legendary mom, and I guess Chopper got left with the IP control of the design of the preamp. So that same preamp goes into every one of these. Well, I don't want to say everyone. He's doing some passive ones now, but for most of them, it goes into these basses. And it's a completely different take from your average active bass. That it has a lot to do with the EQ curves, and basically, like as you roll things up, everything rolls up in a wave. So instead of a shelf, like we call them shelving EQs, where maybe at a certain frequency, we're bringing up everything below that frequency to that same level. Well, instead of doing it like that, this operates more like a curve. So we're taking something's flat and we're saying 60 hertz in the lows is what we want to do, and so we're bringing everything up like this.
Right.
So, there's probably a word for that. I don't know if bell curve, but something to that effect. And so it's a little more musical to a degree. And basically you could, like, if you rolled all of these up, the bass, mid, and treble, you're basically just having flat about 10,
dB higher.
More higher than it was. So you've just rolled everything up. So, but this instrument has the legendary P-bass sound in the proper location. So, are we live? We could roll to that pickup there. Let's just set everything flat so it's not.
So we're going P-bass.
Well, just real quick.
Just take us through that.
Mm-hmm. That same mid-range honk is still there.
Right.
But what we're capable of doing here is we're able to use this blend control where we could go back here and we could have both the P-bass and this Music Man style pickup.
Is that pickup switch there between the two?
So what it does actually is it splits
split.
these coils on this pickup. And this is a unique pickup that's made here in Nashville by one of our very own bass players. His name is Howard Olyate, and he makes pickups. And he also plays on Broadway. Hooray for Broadway. Anyway, hooray for Howard, because he's one of the best guys in the world that I've ever met. He's great. But anyway, this pickup is unique. You can look at it here. The old Music Man style would have had these bigger pole pieces on both sides of the pickup. But what he did here was he put the Music Man style towards the neck here, and then back here you have more of a Fender Jazz style, like the old jazz bass that we were playing a second ago. So I could have any combination of, let's say, just the P-bass. I could come here and I could have the P-bass plus this entire pickup. I could have the P-bass plus the front coils with this switch right here. Or I could switch it to the back and have the P-bass and just the jazz coils. Or I can come back here to just the pickup and have just the jazz coils, or just the Music Man coils, or in the middle and have just that Music Man pickup. And then on top of that, there's built-in distortion right here with a pull-up knob. And then this pickup here, if I pull this up, this extends the high-end frequency from, I think it's probably about 10 to 20. I think if I pull up, I think I'm at 20. So it adds a real high-end character. And so if I were going for the Music Man tone, the legendary Music Man tone, I'm going to scoop the mids, and I'm going to turn the highs and the lows all the way up, put that to the middle, make sure that's pulled up. That Music Man tone is all about a real high-end snap.
Okay.
And so if I got called to a session,
I don't see too many Music Mans on sessions.
They don't have a need for that, because the Music Man tone is very aggressive, and it doesn't have any mid-range. Again, your session producers 99.9% of the time are going to want this thing. Why? Yeah. Because this represents the full spectrum of the bass that anybody wants to hear, and nothing that they don't.
Yeah.
This instrument is capable of going lower and higher than this one.
Yeah.
But in this setting, I've deleted a lot of the mid-range information. Okay, if I don't give you mid-range information, you can't add it.
Yeah.
I didn't give it to you. You could turn your mid-range knob all day long, but you're not going to get it because I never gave it to you to begin with. But if I had this instrument, I gave it to you.
So you can take that out.
And you can take it out if you don't want it. So that's the ultimate.
More EQable.
Why this bass will always be the greatest one ever is because it gives everything, at least in a session standpoint. Now, this can be a not that great of a bass in a live setting.
Yeah.
I don't have any control. If I get to a gig and I'm playing and the room is boomy, I can't take the lows out.
Yeah.
I can add some highs, but I can't take the lows out. So and it's cumbersome. It doesn't balance well on a strap. This horn goes a little further one way, and it kind of neck dives. The way that the body is bigger, the jazz bass has a offset curve to it. Even sitting on your lap, the P bass is going to dive.
Yeah.
But the jazz bass.
Can you play your blues riff on that one?
On this bass?
On your one, your Alien.
Yeah.
That you're holding.
And in the Music Man position.
Music Man position.
Okay.
Cool. All right. And then show us maybe just some other things on this bass that might...
One thing that a couple of friends of mine that have the same bass and I have found is a really cool setting. Typically, if I'm playing this bass, I'm going to go with the P bass sound. Because again...
Yeah.
That's the legendary sound. So that I find myself there all the time. But if I want a cool take on that, I'll split to this front coil here on this, and I'll go back here and get right in the middle. And maybe just a little more highs. So I took my P bass sound, but I've got a little more modern edge to it. I didn't lose any of the important mid-range, but I added some high end and some low end that this one wouldn't have given me.
Right.
And I could still kind of move around in there. You can hear that as that changes. It's subtle, and it takes a long time to really learn how to discern a subtle sound, because sometimes they all kind of sound alike, especially if you're dealing with an MP3.
Yeah.
But in a studio,
even what fits with the band on Broadway, like you said, the P might not work, right? And so
I think the P works actually in every instance.
Yeah.
But I have also found if there was ever a need, what justifies a Music Man live? I think the Music Man is the ultimate live bass.
Okay.
The Music Man has a low mid punch that punches through a mix of guitars live better than the P bass does.
Interesting.
It grunts, and the way that it just sits in the mix, and you have that EQ over the highs and the lows that you don't have on this bass, and you don't need the mids in a live setting.
Yeah.
You need the mids in a studio setting so they can be taken out, but you don't need them in a live setting. So the natural mid displacement that a jazz bass and a Music Man gives you is a good thing, because right out of the gate, I could just play a Music Man flat and have a killer sound, you know, just flat. Clean. You know, that low burpy. Tuba.
Yeah.
If this didn't have so much highs, similar to Jocko. That's what I think. Trombone. You know, that's what these do.
Yeah. One other thing I want to point out, just for the audience that are not bass players, this is a 5-string bass, so you got a low B, right? Which is going to be a segue into maybe talking about your.
Yeah, I had a feeling that's where we were going.
So we got a low B, but we're going to get even lower here in a minute, right?
Yeah. At least it'll look that way, won't it? So, you know, in order to speed up what I'm talking about, you know, basically Jimmy Johnson had the first 5-string, but that still wasn't nothing. Nobody knew what that was. And we came all the way into about, I want to say 1985 or 6, maybe even 7. And so a six-string bass had come out.
Interesting.
Anthony Jackson had asked first for Carl Thompson to build him a six-string bass. I feel like that might have been around 1980. It was a really long 38-inch scale disaster. Nobody had ever built one before, so they didn't know what they were doing, you know. But then eventually he got a hold of Ken Smith, and Ken Smith redesigned the six-string, and they came up with a great six-string bass. So the six-string technically became on the market before the five.
Wow.
Even though Jimmy Johnson had a five made in 76 or 8 by Alembic. Nobody knew. Nobody had any idea. And Jimmy did that because his dad played upright, and there were uprights from the 1700s that had five strings.
Oh.
And it was the same concept. You were going lower.
Yeah.
You know, so, and some went higher. Yeah. You've always had five-string basses for hundreds of years. Anyway, it wasn't a concept on the Fender bass, because everything was a Fender bass up until we got into the 70s and you started having something else. You either played a Fender bass or you played a double bass. This was in 1987, and this was a critical moment because this is what everybody would be playing had the five-string bass not come out. So you look at this and you think, oh, I've seen Victor Wooten play. I know what this is. You're going to go, right? But that's not what this actually does. The point of this thing is I have a Steinberger bass here that is a composite, all graphite. And that's going to be important for what the function of this thing is going to do. But basically what we're going to do here is we've got E to G, just like any other four-string bass. Yeah. But let's just say that the singer comes in today and they say, I'm a little under the weather, guys. Can we drop this to D? Can we do our song in D? Or can we do everything today a whole step down? And you go, man, I've set my bass up the way I like it to play. And I know if I tune a whole step down that my neck's going to move. And but this is a solid piece of graphite, and it will not move no matter what I do. So they came up with this idea that I could take all four strings and drop them instantly and in tune.
Crazy.
Perfect tune. And I just went and took my whole, in less than a second, I could do it and you wouldn't even know, you know. I mean, you know, you wouldn't know. You can make mistakes because you kind of need to like pay attention. It feels funny as you do that. But okay, now that wasn't the idea. I brought my four-string bass to the gig. We're going to play Call in Baton Rouge by Garth Brooks, which was done by Mike Chapman, on a five-string modulus bass. Ah. Okay, now I need the low D because that's the first note of the song, right? Yeah. Oh, okay, well, I could do two things. I could play the whole song in D, or I could go all the way down to B-E-A-D of a five-string. And I have it, and my tuning might be a little off because I was aggressive. You do have to kind of be a little gentle as you're going down low. But I mean, for the most part, to have just moved, all of them.
When you showed that to me, like, mind-blowing thing, this was a couple weeks ago, I was like, that's the best thing since sliced bread. So I go on the internet and I look at these Steinbergers and I see ones that are like $300 or $400. Yeah. I'm like, that's not Jeff's. That must be the only originals with the whammy bar can do that from the 80s?
So unfortunate. What happened, Ned Steinberger was a designer. And he actually designed the very first Spectre bass. It was called NS1. And he came up with the ergonomics of having a body that was radiused, both on the top and in the back, because your belly, you have a belly curve in there. So he came up with all these ideas, and he made the first Spectre bass for Stuart Spector by design. Then, along that same time frame, he actually was making his own designs because the idea came to him, how can you take this Fender thing and do something completely and totally different and fix a lot of the problems that people were having, such as neck dive. Yeah. And he looked at it and he goes, well, why are these up here in the first place? You could put those down there and then you wouldn't have neck dive. And it started from that. And then it's just like,
what else? Yeah.
What's there that don't need to be?
Yeah.
How can I get rid of everything on this instrument that doesn't need to be there? And most folks, when they look at this, they go, oh, that's so ugly. And that's because we've been tricked into thinking this is the only thing that should ever be allowed to exist. When in reality, this is genius, because he literally streamlined everything down to the very things that you absolutely have to have. It has to be a 34-inch scale to be a Fender bass.
Yeah.
So we got that. We've got the ability to tune, and they're down here. We've got 2 pickups, so if you like the jazz bass sound, you kind of have it, but the irony of this is these are actually P-bass pickups in these shells. So you have, now they're reversed, so there's 2 coils down here and there's 2 up here. There's 2 down here and there's 2 up here. So if I go up here and I turn those highs down, I've got my P-bass. Everything that you love, maybe a little cleaner, which is a good thing, but everything you love about the P-bass, or it's all there. Everything you loved about the P-bass is still here, but then you go to the middle, you got that jazz bass thing, or you can go to the back, This sounds like a grand piano to me. You know how when you go down and you hit the bottom of a grand piano and it goes boom.
Right.
Well, all of the lows, all of the mids, all of the highs, they're all present. Okay, why this bass then? Because, and I've shared this with you, you might look at this and you might think, well, you've taken everything away. It probably doesn't weigh anything. It's probably like a 3-pound bass, right? But the reality of it is...
Oh, yeah, it's heavier than I thought it would be, although I don't know if it's any heavier
well, what
than
it is
the P-bass.
Originally when they first made these, they were made out of Kevlar. And the idea being, we're looking for space-age material to give us the density.
Oh, yes.
We need the density, because without the density, we don't have any low end. You can. There are guys now that are making like 5- and 6-pound basses. Sounds like a dream come true. The problem is, there's no bottom end.
Right.
And you can't, if you don't have it, you can't fix it. You can't put it in. You can add an artificial preamp low end, but it's just going to add mud to what was never there to begin with. The only way you can properly add something is when you had it in the first place.
Yeah.
So that's what this thing is. This is.
But the model, I guess, is what I'm saying is, because I see some cheapos out there, but that's like $4,000, $5,000.
We were getting there.
Model, right?
So basically,
what model is that?
This is called an XL2.
Okay.
And then it's called a TA. The T stands for the trans trim, and the A stands for the active preamp. So we have an XL2, 2 pickups. I'm not really sure what the XL. The original model, the first model in '78 was called a L. Got me there. Don't know what it meant. But this is an XL, and then 2 trans trim active.
Is that the one that Sting played? Like that model?
He played an L2, because it was one of the first ones that came out. Sting got one of the very first basses that they ever made. Anyway, long story short, these were super expensive to make. And Ned didn't hardly make any profit. After he paid his people, he didn't make any profit. He was operating a business that was literally going in the red, and he couldn't pull it out. He had investors, he had people that were trying to help him because they believed in the product. There's nothing about this to not believe, but yet they were so expensive that they couldn't make it. And so ultimately, he decided to sell it to Gibson. So he sold it to Gibson in 1988. These were made in Newburgh, New York. And then when they sold to Gibson, Gibson moved production out to, I believe, California, if I'm not mistaken. And they stayed out there maybe for a year, and then they came to Nashville. And then they started making these in Nashville, and probably made them maybe about 6 years. And then they decided that they couldn't make money with it either. So these were made with a mold. There was a mold where you actually poured the epoxy stuff in there and then let it set overnight, and it would create this beast. And so the guy that owned Gibson at the time, or ran it, his name was Henry, and he destroyed the molds so that nobody could ever make them again. And then he decided that he would have his foreign import models make a wooden bass in this look. And they'd sell you on the idea that you were getting a Steinberger because he owned the name, so he could put Steinberger on it. But it is not this instrument at all.
Wow. And so are those like DeLoreans? Is it impossible to find those like that? No?
Nearly. Well, for example, this one with this trans trim, they were only 140 made, and I think there's only maybe 40 that we know where they are.
Wow. Crazy.
So, you're talking about the whole wide world. This is about one of 40 in the whole wide world. And there's a guy that worked for Steinberger, and he makes bridges now. His name is Jeff Babbitt's. And he makes add-on bridges that you can buy for any bass now. But anyway, he still does work. So he actually put this one completely back to brand new for me a couple of years ago. Just refinished it, put new frets in, and it's like a brand new bass. So I want to tell you a little bit about another bass. This is kind of special here. I just recently got it. But I've been a fan of these guys for years. It's James Tyler, and he's more notably known for making guitars for the Stars. And in certain circles, you would put him up there with Howard Dumble of the Dumble Amplifier Company. Yeah. What those guys did is they didn't build instruments or amplifiers for the common. They only built them for people that they liked, or people that were session players, basically. So this instrument was actually made. It's one of two that he made. He made this one specifically for LA session bass player Neil Stubenhaus.
One of two ever.
Ever. Only. And Neil, most notably known for Lionel Richie, a lot of just amazing LA powerhouse cuts. We could go down the line. I think maybe some Michael Jackson. And likely this bass was probably used on some of that.
Oh my God!
Because the time period is right, and he didn't have a whole lot of these. I think he only had maybe 3 Tylers.
Yeah.
What makes this one unique is that it for its time period, I think we've decided that this is around a 91, 92, and this had one of the first ever MIDI. If you don't know what that means, it's a way to do synthesizers. Yeah. It's a way to control MIDIs, musical instrument digital interface. So you're controlling a synth from the inner workings here of this design, which is way more complicated than I could ever tell you about. But there was a guy in Australia that figured this out, how he could take an analog instrument like a bass with strings and convert the signal over to MIDI, long before the modern day things that we see now. This is 92, 91. This is prehistoric in a lot of ways. But to be honest with you, this is probably every bit as good or maybe even better than the things that are made now. So Steve Chick, his company was called, or is still called, Industrial Radio, and they're out of Australia. And so Jim Tyler put this into this bass, and then he also did another one, a red one for Abe Laboriel Sr., 2 of them. So Neil's was the blue one and Abe's was the red one. It has EMG PJ pickups in it, and so again we're coming back to that precision bass in the same location that it needs. That's very important that it be right there.
Interesting.
And then this jazz bass pickup is just here. A lot of times you'll think, I want to set this flat. You'll think, okay, I've got my standard P bass tone, the full tone, and then you'll think, okay, how can I make that more interesting? How can I take that old tone and give it a character that's going to maybe have a little more sparkle to it? So you introduce that rear pickup there. Whether you could do it in the middle, whether you have them both on, the slap bass thing, or we could just blend back to that to get a little of that aggressive Jocko, lyrical vocal.
Sure.
Let's do the lick. Tight. What does tight mean? Everybody says tight. There's nothing loose about it. It's the opposite of loose. It's tight. Everything is clean, articulate. There's no jangle. There's no flab.
Right.
We're tight. The tighter something can play, the faster you can play, and not lose any definition. That's my idea of a tight tone. Right. If I move to that P pickup, I'm going to get a little looser. But then again, that's a good thing too.
Sure.
So, and then sure enough, in that middle, it's a compromise between the two.
Nice. Wow, that's cool. You can't demonstrate the MIDI, but just imagine a synth bass.
But here's what's super cool about this. You can take the simple mute right here. This is made by a company called Nordstrand. This is a Nordy mute, and you get them in the various different sizes that your strings are spaced in. This one is spaced like a Fender, so I can use it in that way. And you just put that right in there. And then this has a boost control. So I have a middle detent right here on my volume that would be the normal. But because I've lost a little bit of power by choking my strings, I can hit that boost control and get all of that power back. So, I'm on a session. I didn't bring my upright.
Right.
But you need an upright.
Yeah, okay. Right.
I mean, I'm going to get that. I'm going to get that choked tone, dry. So that's pretty cool that it has that feature. And, I've got mids, and then these bottom controls right here are for the MIDI. You can see the whole back of this bass is routed out for all the complex MIDI.
Do you plug in the MIDI cable, or is it a special?
At the bottom.
You got it.
At the bottom.
Okay.
And then there's also like a digital display right here that reads out. So it tell you, for example,
you MIDI notes and.
Well, I'm on setting number 3 on the synth.
Oh, the channel.
Yeah, so I can actually manipulate.
Oh gosh.
That here, and so the only thing that the MIDI won't do is it won't do open notes, because it reads off of each fret.
Oh.
You can see right there. You see those little lines that run kind of diagonal there. Well, they're separating the fret, so it knows if I hit right there, that sensor is saying, okay, that's that note, and that's sending immediately to the MIDI. So that's how it knows. But when you hit an open string, it don't know what you're doing. So you have to play.
So no low E's, or you have to tune down.
I think we got one more that we're going to check out, right?
Let's do it, yeah.
So this will probably be the last one we talk about. I got a few more, but...
A few more, ladies and gentlemen. A few more.
A lot of times you run into a little bit of a repetition, and I don't really like repetition. I try to not have anything that sounds the same. I think for the majority, most of them are pretty unique. There's a fretless, there's an electric upright, there's a Rickenbacker, so they're all just trying to represent different tonalities. Yeah. But this one is unique. I first really kind of dove into the idea of wanting to look into this because this is a Lee Sklar model, and I like Lee. I really respect him a lot. I'm not really a hollow body player, so when I looked at that, I thought, that's going to be that typical woofy thing. I don't think that's going to be for me. But anyway, we're talking about, we've got a good friend in common. Her name's Ashley Brimhall. She's over at Warwick, and she definitely helps all the Nashville bass players find the basses of their dreams if that's something you want to do. And I sent her a message and I said, I'd like to find one of these Lee Sklar basses. And she says, oh, well, I've got one. It's like, of course you do. So she did, and it worked out that this is the right bass for me. But I didn't know when I got it. I had no idea what it was going to sound like. So immediately that day that I picked it up, I took it to a gig downtown on Broadway. And we were playing, and somebody called out, Little Texas, God Bless Texas. Well, to know me is to know how much I love the band Little Texas. And I told him that I had chased this tone for years. Okay, there's a bass solo at the end of the song, and it's just fantastic. Everything that made me want to be a player was in this song. And so I said, I'll get the Steinberger, because I thought he played a Steinberger. And long before we made friends, well, come to find out after I made friends with Dwayne that song was cut on a rare Gibson hollow body bass that had Bartolini active electronics, and they only made about 5 of them. And they're so rare that only somebody that worked at Gibson, like Dwayne, has one. And so, and his is in pieces, by the way. It don't even work anymore. So, but he did record that song with that bass. And so all these years, I've searched for this thing. Well, what you essentially have here is you have 2 single coil pickups, but they're active. And that would have been very similar to what the Bartolini pickup would have been. The location is where the pickups would have been, and then you would have had a onboard preamp on this hollow body bass. And so here we have an onboard preamp. It just basically has a bass and treble controls here, and you have blend and volume. And so, anyway, they call the song, and I thought, well, because this is the standard sound, and that doesn't sound much off from what we've been doing. It's nice, but very grand piano-y, a lot like what we just played. But I thought, okay, well, the Little Texas thing, that's typically favoring the back pickup. Mm-hmm. So I just randomly went back there, and I went. That same smile came across my face, and I'm like, that's it.
Yep.
Immediately. And I mean, like, I played it for you, and you're like, yeah, that's it. It's like, there's no question. Snoopy the dog could play this and get that tonality. It's not me, but that's just the nature of that kind of pickup on this kind of bass with that kind of preamp played. It's like a trombone. Yeah. The tonality, a marching band with a trombone solo out there going, it's in your face, and it's like articulate. Mm. So anyway, by happenstance, accident, I ended up.
A couple questions for you before we play the blues riff. Single coil, but I don't hear any buzz.
Isn't that something? I don't either.
So
Look here, I'm moving the pickup around, but they are. Huh. You might ask Ashley about that.
Yeah, secret. Yeah. Did I have another question for you? Oh yeah, this. What's this do? We won't tell anyone.
Well, so the way that I understand this right here is when it's in the up position, it does this. But when it's in the down position, it does this. And then in the middle position, it does this. So it's everything you need it to be.
Right, exactly. We won't give it away.
Okay, another important thing to what helps with a grand piano sound, metal to metal. So this has a brass nut. So if I'm playing an open string, my open string sounds the same as a as a fretted note, because essentially it is.
Interesting.
You don't have that. If I'd played that with an A right there, it would have a dull A. Yeah. Really dull. This would have a nice, clean tone to it, and this would be dull. Yeah. And this would have the cleaner. Because but with this, anytime you add the brass nut, you're making that open string sound the same tonality as the fretted note. Now, when would that not matter when you have a fretless?
That makes me want to add a brass nut to every bass, though. Why don't people?
Okay, so the problem with the brass nuts is that they tend to grab. There's no lubrication there. You're metal on metal. If you've got round wounds, you've got the grinding of the winding that can get caught up in there and pull. And so sometimes they'll be out of tune just because the string is not pulled right. There's some downside, but it's also tougher, more durable. It's going to last longer. It's not going to break. I've had broken nuts in the past. You have that. I love the tonality of a brass nut, and this bass and my Ken Smith over there, and the Rickenbacker now has a brass nut. So to me, it's as good as you can get.
Okay, we're going to talk about some outboard gear, so we're going to take just a quick break, and then, there we go. Nice. All right, so finally we get to see this work of art here, and you were telling us a little bit about it before, but can you just kind of recap what you were saying about your V72 rig?
So we believe that that's a late 50s Telefunken tube V72 preamp. And that was one of about 80 pieces that Sean Gallant, who was Larry London's son, the famous studio drummer, Sean got those pieces directly from Abbey Road. They came over in a boat. And this would have been around 1986 or so. And it's likely, not promisable, not verifiable, but it's likely that they were used with the Beatles sessions that were done back in the days in the 60s. But anyway, that rack was put together for the benefit of David to be able to put it in a session rack so that he could cart it around a little more safely. And it was done, Sean's place was called Jungle Island. You can see that name there right by David Hungate there. And then the sticker above there is the old legendary Telefunken Diamond sticker. So anyway, that was racked up in around 1994. And David, in 94, 95, I think he did the first Shania Twain record with Mutt Lange producing. So that would have been on that record along with everything that David did from that point on all the way to 2016 when he did the last Toto record that he played on. And then I mentioned that I read about David's rack back in August of '96, Bass Player magazine. So he also had these Tube Tech pieces. So the first one underneath the preamp there is the legendary Tube Tech compressor. It's called a CL1. And that one is a CL1A. It was the first one ever made, and it's hand-wired. As a matter of fact, all three of those pieces are hand-wired to turret boards. Later on, in the late 80s to early 90s, they switched to what they called a CL1B, where they did everything on a circuit board. Whether or not that changes or has any effect whatsoever on the audio signal, I don't know. But legend has it there's not very many of these that are hand-wired, so it's pretty cool. Even David Hungate's own Tube Tech stuff was not hand-wired. So anyway, that top piece is a legendary compressor. It gives you very much of the popular LA2A type compression, the optical compression. So you have a little more control than you would have over an LA2A. It wouldn't give you the ability to change the attack or the release. So it's a little more controllable. And that VU meter over there is very nice because you can see the input signal, you can see the output signal, and the amount of compression. Whereas on the LA2A, I believe you're only seeing the compression. Now below that, this is the strange one. Not a lot of people know about what this is, but the old Pultec company, Pulse Technologies, they made these tube equalizers basically for television and radio. And it was a mastering type of EQ so that you could take, your audio for your television or radio performance and give it a beefier quality so that it sounded good across the airwaves. And back then you were dealing with AM radio, and it was really difficult to get anything to have a low-end content, or for that matter, a high-end content. Everything had more of a mid-range, and the sound qualities in the 50s and 60s was completely different from what we hear now. But these things were built like, tanks, and these are among the highest quality audiophile EQs that you can get, and they're tube EQs. So that middle one there is called the mid-range EQ, and you see at the front there you have a peak, which is a little bit of a bell-type curve that those frequencies you see to the left are basically, even though it says 0.3, it's basically telling you you're dealing with either 200 hertz, 300 hertz, 500 hertz, 700, or 1, and you have the ability to add with that next knob. Then as you move over to the middle, you have the dip, and the dip there is going to give you those frequencies and allow you to take those away. So the more that you turn that second knob up on the dip section, you're actually taking mid-range out. So that's why I was saying earlier with a P-bass, why the P-bass is so great running through a setup like this is you have the full signal coming in, and you can then manipulate that signal. If you need less mid-range, you just find the frequency that you want to take less of, and then you dip it out. But then you can also peak those frequencies on the front side. Then you come back here and you have another peak set, and this is going to be your higher mid-range. So this is going to be your 1.5 all the way up to 5K. and you have the ability to peak those as well. Then you come down to the bottom. This is the more popular, what we call the Pultec Program EQ. And this is, they've been making these for years, Pulse Technologies and Tube Tech and Manley. A lot of companies have done the program equalizer, but this is the main one because it's covering the basic bottom end and the basic top end, the things that really are going to make your signal sound perfect. This is the legendary tone that you would have gotten with James Jamerson at Motown. When you heard a Motown record, that's the finished product after his P bass would go through a DI. Then it would run into this program equalizer, which would give it a little fatter bottom, probably on the 60 hertz, but they might have done 100 hertz. Hard to understand which one they might have used. We tend to know that a Fender bass hits around 100 hertz on the bottom naturally, and on the top end there, it's going to hit around 1.5 or 2. So those frequencies are represented, but you can obviously boost them and get a little more if you need that. The fun thing about this particular program EQ, I'll try to not get too much shade on you there, but you have also an attenuator here. So let's say, for example, you got too much bottom end. So you can actually come in here and you can attenuate and take a little bit of that bottom end out. But what a lot of guys like to do is they like to come in here and they like to boost and attenuate at the same time. And what happens is there's just like a frequency, one frequency between these two that allow you to do this, and it generates a completely different sound altogether. So this is really popular to do on a kick drum. Bass players like to do it too, but it really generates a completely different sound than when you just have the one by itself. So that's a fun Pultec fact.
All right, tell us about the little box here. Well, tell us about the basement and then how the box fits in.
Well, so this is a really cool, it looks like a really old Bassman, doesn't it? That's a one-off that Fender did out of the custom shop. They did it for a promotional to take pictures of when they first brought these out, and made it look like an old one. And it really does. It looks like an old one, but it's actually fairly new. It's around a 2011 model. But it is a tube circuit, and it does the Fender Bassman thing with 100 watts instead of the typical 30 or 50 watt versions that they had. You got a lot more power. But anyway, what I'll do with this is I'll take this and when I need an amp signal, typically the rack covers the majority of things you'd want, but sometimes you want an amp sound and you just have to get it with an amp. So I can take it out of there and I go into this box down here. This was developed by our Nashville session guy. We just lost him this past year, Michael Rhodes. He developed this with some guys out of New Jersey that had a group called Euphonic Audio that's no longer around. And this is called a rumble seat. So inside this box here, you have an 8-inch woofer, and you actually have a little microphone stand that can hold a mic. So there's actually a little 57 in there that's got a right angle on it, and it's right down on the very center of that 8-inch cone. And you just shut the lid on it and plug the speaker in from the outside, and have the ultimate control of getting a huge bass sound out of a very small setup at a very low power output. So to hear it through the system there, it would sound like an 810,
yeah.
When in reality it's a single 8 with a very low power setting. And this right here is just a little small practice amp that I use, when I just need to plug into something quick and hear something. It's also designed for upright bass.
I don't want to be a complete pedal geek, but let's do your, can we do just this pedal board just for a minute?
Well, like I said, the session guys of old had those racks, and they were going back and forth to the different studios in town, and they wanted to maintain their sound. So no matter what bass they played, no matter what, they always had a similar sound and a similar output and control over that. So I've had many different iterations of things, but I've tried in recent years to get it small as possible, but while still having the ultimate control. So basically what you have here is you have, this piece actually is the most important piece right here. It's made out of Denmark. It's called the Caveman Audio, and it's a bass preamp, BP1 compact. And this is essentially the same as a Neve 1073 preamp in a small pedal format. And so what I do is I come into here first, and then I've got a loop that takes me out into the pedal board. So once I hit the pedal board, then the first thing I've got here is a tuner, which is Peterson. And if you're not using Peterson, are you really tuning? I don't know. I come out of that, and I come into, I told Dave, this is my secret weapon right here. It's EWS BMC, and I learned about it from Michael Rhodes. And it's one of the few little tricks that he actually did teach me. But anyway, it's just a subtle little mid-range control, and you can see I've just barely got that past the noon there, set to a certain frequency. And it works on every bass that I play because it's just hitting a frequency that just lifts every bass that I play just a slight amount. And as Michael would say, brings a little forward to the mix. So anyway, we come out of there and we go into this is a Universal Audio. It's a fairly newer piece. It just came out, but it's an 1176. And Universal Audio ought to know how to make 1176s because that's what they do for a living. So the pedal does what it says on the tin, as the English say.
Compressor, and that's just going to make all your notes even.
And if you didn't know this setting here, this is called the Dr. Pepper setting. And if you ever wonder how to set up one, just go to this first, and if you need anything else, you probably won't. But it's called Dr. Pepper because they used to have a slogan that said drink Dr. Pepper at 10, 2, and 4 every day. And so you'll see these knobs are set at 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and this is set to the ratio of 4. Yeah. So that's the Dr. Pepper setting.
Yeah.
Then we go into this.
There's a lot of stuff in that. Huh?
I've got a switcher here. This allows me to control the presets because on the Stomp you only have 3 controls, and I've set this up to where it's in Stomp mode. So I want to be able to control the effects for every bass. So within every bass, I typically like to have octaver, drive, chorus, the compression that's in here, because sometimes the settings are really good for compression here. And then this is a half step down. So no matter what bass I'm playing, I can hit that button and go half step down for every bass. So it's an instant, hey, can we do this a half step down today? And it's like, bam, I'm there. And you can't tell the difference that much in the context. This is a mini switcher, and this allows me to go up and down on my presets. So I'm really quick. You know, every preset, every bass I have 2 presets. I have a clean set, and then the first one is typically more of a grunty EQ. It's going to growl a little more. So I can go, you know, all through the various different basses. Steinberger, Rickenbacker, Alien Audio, Tyler's, you know. That's a setting that I've got for Wichita Lineman to do the 6-string bass solo in that song. You know, but it's just, it's really quick, it's really consistent, and because I'm using it through the loop instead of going through here, the impedances are right. And if you didn't know that, like, it's the only real way to get good sound. Because otherwise, if I hit the front of this, every one of these has a different impedance, and it destroys your sound. So by the time you went through all this and you get out to here, go to a DI, your sound is trash. Whereas here, I've come in at the proper impedance. I've come in here at the proper impedance, left here, come back in here at the proper impedance, and I'm coming out with a quality signal. So it's literally the best that it could possibly be. And I've got settings for every bass. They're all set to the same level, so I can change basses.
One more quick question on this one, because I know y'all did that tube DI shootout. You don't really use a tube DI for live on Broadway, at least, right?
I have.
Okay. And you said you like that Fat Boy that Brett makes, right?
Sure. But we did a shootout, and it won, hands down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Levels above all the others. But they all have, it's like these basses. They all have a character that is different.
Yeah. And so right now, though, obviously it's going to be solid state. So you just experiment, like you said, as far as tube front end or solid state.
I told you that, you know, Mike Chapman was my mentor. Yeah. And I trust Mike, and he had tried everything out. And he always said that every studio that he went into that had a Neve console, he thought he sounded better.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree.
And so to the extent that he went out and found a Neve 1073, a real one. Right. A real one. And this is not a real one. This is a copy, but it's pretty doggone close.
Wow.
So, I mean, had this been available to Mike when he was alive, he would probably loved it. You know, he was a simple guy. He didn't really like all the stuff.